The Craigslist Ripper. In 2010, police were out searching for a missing woman named Shannon Gilbert. During that search, they came across human remains in the bushes off the side of the road. That discovery turned into something much bigger. As they kept searching that same area, more victims were found. 4 women were located close together. They became known as the Gilgo Four. They had gone missing between 2007 and 2010. Their names were Maureen, Megan, Melissa, and Amber. Each of them had been working as an escort and using Craigslist to arrange meetings with clients. They would communicate with someone, set up a time, and go out to meet them. After that point, contact stopped. Years later, they were all found in the same stretch along Ocean Parkway, wrapped and left in similar condition. As the investigation continued, more remains were found further down the road. Some of those victims dated back to earlier years, going as far back as the 1990s. Not all of them were identified right away. Some cases involved partial remains, which made identification take longer. One part of the case that stands out is the phone activity. In Melissa Barthelomy's case, her phone was used after her disappearance. Calls were made to her younger sister. The person calling spoke calmly and kept the calls short. This went on over a period of time before the phone stopped being used. Investigators tracked those calls to areas in New York City. They also looked into burner phones that were used to contact several of the victims. These phones were activated, used briefly, and then discarded. There were also witness accounts connected to some of the victims. In Amber Costello's case, a man was seen picking her up. He was described as a larger man driving a dark-colored pickup truck. That detail came up during the investigation and was looked at closely. Police spent years going through phone records, online activity, and timelines. They mapped out when each victim was last seen and how they were contacted. There were clear similarities in how meetings were arranged. The location along Ocean Parkway stayed the same through all of it. It wasn't a random spot. The same area was used multiple times over several years. The name Craigslist Ripper came from the way the victims were contacted. It's not an official title, just something people started calling the case because of that pattern. For a long time, the case stayed open without a confirmed suspect. Different leads were followed, and the investigation changed hands over the years. Evidence was re-examined as technology improved, including DNA testing. Even with all that work, the person responsible was not publicly identified for years. The case sat with known victims, a known location, and a clear method of contact, but no final answer attached to it for a long time. Ocean Parkway still looks the same today. Cars pass through, and the area doesn't stand out unless you already know the history behind it. And for years, that was the situation. A series of victims connected through similar circumstances, all found in the same place, and a case where the person responsible remained out there without being officially caught. Messa Bone Collector. In February of 2009, a woman walking her dog on the edge of the desert in Albuquerque noticed something unusual in the sand. The area was part of the West Messa, a wide open stretch of scrubland on the city's southwest side. It was quiet, windswept, and largely undeveloped. At first glance, nothing about it stood out. Then, human remains were uncovered. Police secured the area and began searching the Messa more thoroughly. Over the next several weeks, they discovered a burial ground spread across the desert. 11 women and 1 teenage girl had been buried in shallow graves not far from neighborhoods and construction sites. The bodies had been placed close together. The case would become known as the West Messa murders, and the unknown offender was labeled by the media as the West Messa Bone Collector. Most of the victims had disappeared between 2001 and 2005. Many were involved in sex work and struggled with addiction. Several were last seen in areas of Albuquerque known for street-level prostitution. The desert itself played a role in why the graves went unnoticed for so long. Construction in the area had stalled during the housing crash, leaving empty lots and unfinished roads. For years, the burial site remained undisturbed, only a short distance from where people lived. Investigators determined that the graves were shallow but deliberate. The remains had been placed carefully. The space in between the graves indicated someone returning more than once, someone who felt comfortable navigating the same stretch of desert at night. There were signs that ligatures had been used in several of the killings. Personal items were missing. Identification was difficult in some cases because of the condition of the remains. The passage of time and exposure to the elements had erased critical evidence. As the investigation unfolded, authorities examined phone records and known offenders in the area. One name that surfaced repeatedly was Lorenzo Montoya, a man who had been shot and killed by a homeowner in 2006 after allegedly attempting to abduct a woman. Montoya had a history of violence and had been linked to sex workers in Albuquerque. Some investigators believe he could be responsible for the West Messa murders, especially since the timeline of the disappearance appeared to stop after his death. But there was never enough physical evidence to formally connect him to the burial site. Other theories suggested more than one offender. Albuquerque had struggled with high rates of violence against women involved in prostitution during the early 2000s. Some argued that the clustering of graves might have been coincidental, or that one individual discovered an existing dumping ground and used it again. Still, the similarities between the victims, their backgrounds, and time frame pointed strongly toward a single organized killer. What makes the case particularly unsettling is how long the graves remained hidden. For years, families reported their daughters missing, flyers were posted, calls were made, but the desert held its silence. The burial ground sat less than a mile from residential developments. At night, headlines from passing cars would have been visible in the distance. Despite extensive investigation, no one has been arrested or convicted in connection with the West Messa murders. The case remains officially unsolved. The evidence collected from the scene has been preserved, and authorities have stated that advances in forensic technology could eventually provide answers. But as of now, there is no confirmed killer, no trial, and no verdict. Ibodon Forest of Horror. In March of 2014, motorcycle taxi drivers in Ibodon, Nigeria were searching for one of their colleagues who had gone missing when they stumbled across something in the forested outskirts of the city. The area known locally as Soka is dense, quiet, and largely undeveloped. At first, it appeared to be an abandoned construction site tucked into the bush, but the closer they looked, the more they realized something was very wrong. They found remains, dozens of human skulls, skeletal fragments, and the personal belongings of men, women, and children. Some of the bodies were still in the process of decomposing. Others had been carefully hidden, placed in corners, or buried in shallow pits nearby. Several people were found alive, chained, and confined in dark, empty rooms, emaciated and injured. They had been held captive for weeks, some for months, forced into horrific conditions that no one could have imagined. Most of the victims had been kidnapped from the city over the preceding years. Reports suggested that many were involved in vulnerable situations. Some were working in sex trade, others had been lured with false promises, and in nearly every case, the captors were deliberate and calculated. Those who were rescued described being beaten, starved, and terrorized. Some survivors spoke of rituals and threats designed to control and intimidate them, hinting at practices that were as psychological as they were physical. The location itself allowed the crimes to remain hidden for so long. The West Soka area is thick with underbrush, with unfinished buildings and piles of debris that offered cover. For years, families reported loved ones missing. Flyers went up, calls were made, but the captives and those who had been killed were tucked into a place where the city's bustle couldn't reach them. Authorities recovered evidence of tools, chains, and other instruments used to subdue the victims. Clothing, personal items, and even mobile phones were found thrown around, suggesting the site had been used repeatedly over a long period. The number of remains and their state made it clear this was not a single incident, but a sustained operation, carried out with knowledge of the terrain and confidence that it could remain undisturbed. Some of the suspects were arrested in connection with the site, including guards and local accomplices. Weapons and other tools were seized, but despite the arrest, the identities of the main perpetrators remain largely unknown. Many believe that powerful individuals may have been involved, or that the network behind the captives extended further than what police could uncover. Families of victims were left without closure, and questions about who orchestrated the kidnappings and murders remain unanswered. The Ibodon Forest of Horror, as it has come to be called, stands as a reminder of how violence can exist hidden in plain sight. The area has since been cleared and redeveloped, but the memory of the graves, the chains, and the victims' suffering lingers. There is no confirmed resolution. No one has been definitively convicted of orchestrating the mass abductions and killings. The forest's secrets may never be fully revealed, and the full story of the Ibodon Forest serial killers remains unknown.